Debbie is inland, crawling across South Georgia. Heavy rains, torrential downpours. We've got severe weather over areas from the northeast across the lower Great Lakes into the upper Midwest. And we have a busy next couple of days weather-wise. So let's get right to it tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the descriptor to this podcast. Use the coupon code, Mr. Rayo.
2024, summer 2024,
Yes, and if you do, you will get
10% off.
All right, so here we are. First of all, good evening to everybody on the chat board, and those of you who are watching in the background. Welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast as we take a look at what was Hurricane Debbie that made landfall, Joe, this morning near Cedar Key in the Florida Big Bend, and now is literally, you can almost walk as fast as this storm is moving across South Georgia. It's only going at about 5 or 6 miles an hour, so it's going to take all night and probably a good portion of the day tomorrow before the center emerges. And in the meantime, they're getting pounded with heavy rain in South and Southeast Georgia and into South Carolina, and they're going to get a ton of it.
And I heard on the CBS Evening News tonight with Major Garrett. Major Garrett said that according to one climatologist, this was, and I'm calling this out. I really, he said it was a once in a thousand year storm.
Oh, now I thought they were once in 100 year, or once in 500 years. Now there's one in 1,000. Let's go to one in 10,000. How's that? Well, that's the next logical step is from, if you're going to go that road.
Well, we've seen storms like this. I mean, Harvey is a good example. About 5 or 6 years ago,
Hmm.
and the damage that it did to Houston, Texas. So I'm not sure about 1,000 years. Once in a thousand.
And Imelda, I think a
Imelda.
year or so later, a year or two later. So that's two 100-year events right there. Yeah,
Well,
the hyperbole. Sometimes it's the hyperbole just drives me crazy. You gotta put a title on it. You gotta make it, make the title sexy, and then you gotta sell it.
that's the name of the game. Well, I don't have to tell you that. That's the name
Right.
of the game in television today is to, indeed make it as sexy and as encompassing as possible, and have people tune in because it's all a ratings game. So
Right. We
they,
don't have that problem here since you and I are both incredibly sexy individuals, so we really don't have to work at it. Um, you know, that's clearly obvious.
we just did our job and we told our viewers exactly what we were expecting, and did not try to play up on it. Did not try to make it sound any worse than it might have been. But this is what sells in television these days. So if you want to make it a once in 100 or 500 or 1,000 year storm, go right ahead.
Yeah, knock yourself out. All right, let's go to the radar view here. As you can see it on the wide view, the green boxes are flash flood warnings, and we've got a couple of them in North Florida. They've been going in on and off all day long in North Florida. Uh, Looks like it's raining heavily from Jacksonville northward. The banding nature, curling bands that are going into southeast Georgia. The actual center is about 30 miles south of Valdosta, Georgia, in the last advisory at 5 o'clock. And we have suddenly three additional flash flood warnings that have popped up, two in southeast Georgia and one that extends into South Carolina. And we've got some bands of heavy rain that are now moving into South Carolina. Looks like some have reached Charleston, but not quite to Myrtle Beach. Looks like there's some rain there aloft. And the thing is, I mean, sort of look at this on the radar and you think, okay, it's raining, obviously. Uh, but so at first glance, it's not the most impressive. It's a tropical system. It's got its own signature, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen others that have been juicier than this. But the problem here is that this thing, I mean, it's literally moving so slowly that you're talking, here we are Monday night, and a lot of these areas here in from southeast Georgia into North Carolina are going to be getting rain with very little in the way of breaks between now and late Thursday. So,
And it does. I just mentioned about Harvey. I mean, the track off of South Carolina, the South Carolina coast, is going to create a fire hose of sorts, a fire hose of moisture with basically the same dimensions as Harvey in Houston. And the coastal shape is the same. The vapor transport from the Atlantic over the Gulf Stream is going to dump literally billions, if not, dare I say, even maybe trillions of gallons of water between now and the end of this week. So yeah, we're talking about in the worst case scenario, 1 to 2 feet of rain, and in some cases there may even be more than that, maybe in excess of, dare I say, 30 inches of rain for some specific location near or along the path of this storm.
and this is what WPC is doing. I've got using the whole um, U.S. map here with the rainfall, and they just added. It's a small speck, but they added they've been going back and forth with this 20-inch plus area in South Carolina, and I did a quick refresh because sometimes, even though they update the map twice a day, sometimes they add things during in between. An hour later or 2 hours later. So they added a little purple speck there, right, not too far from somewhere near Charleston of 20 plus inches, and a fairly robust area of 10 to 15 that goes from southern Georgia into southwestern North Carolina. I mean, it's going to happen. I mean, we're talking. Whenever you'd have a tropical system with a tropical signature on the satellite, it's just, it just happens. You get torrential downpours, and as Joe pointed out, with the part of the circulation is over the Southwest Atlantic, and when it goes out offshore, which the center will do, it is going to get juiced up, and you are going to have more of a fire hose of moisture coming into the coast. Now, in the east, from Maine down and through Virginia, there's a very generous 5 to 7 inch area of rain, and from southeast New England through southernmost New England, Long Island, across New Jersey into portions of southeast Pennsylvania, you have an area of 7 to 10 inches of rain being forecast for the next 7 days. So this just takes into account everything that's going on between now and this coming weekend. Uh, we do have to break this down a bit because of the fact that we have this system that's coming through tomorrow and for the Northeast. The one tonight is further to the north. This next one is going to be further to the south as far as shower and thunderstorm activity is concerned. So, this is why they have put flood watches up now for much of eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, New York City, and Long Island, as well as southern Connecticut. So just bear that in mind, that there probably could be tomorrow night with these thunderstorms that are probably going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody gets a quick inch or two of rain, and it maybe in some of the heavier thunderstorms, it could be double that.
Absolutely. And if you look at the contours, I know Joe, you like to look at the filled in colors on these maps, but if you try, it's almost impossible to try to read the contours, the isohyets, um, the uh, the areas of just exactly how much for a given region is anticipated to get whatever amount of rain is going to fall over the next 7 days. I can't even I can't even make it out. It's going to be a lot. What
Yeah,
else can I
yeah.
tell you?
It's my glasses. I have good glasses. All right, so we've got flood watches up also for much of eastern North Carolina and points south and west into South Carolina and Georgia. Tropical storm warnings are up for the coast of South Carolina, also for inland areas. And this is something new this year with these tropical systems that they are going to be putting tropical storm warnings up for inland areas in situations like this. In the past, they never they in the past they would do it sometimes and not in others, but they've just kind of made it a policy now that they're going to do this. and they've got tropical storm warnings that extend down still into northern Florida because they're getting gusty winds on the backside, even in some counties that are well inland. Uh, Also, we've got severe thunderstorm watches. There was a watch. Now, some of it's already played out, but it's still up for parts of north central and northwest Pennsylvania. Also, for east central New York, east and north of Albany, into southern Vermont, New Hampshire, and in a small portion of southern Maine. So we've got that going on. In the Great Lakes, because this complex tonight goes from New England to the lower lakes, back up into the upper Midwest. We've got tornado watch. We have a tornado watch up in southeast Minnesota into Iowa and portions of western Wisconsin. Flash flood watches over there, and then to the south of that, we've got a severe thunderstorm watch that extends down into northern Illinois. And this is what the radar looks like tonight in the Northeast. They're getting some echoes up in northern New Jersey and just to the east, just to the west of you. But the stronger cells are more back up north and west of the Catskills over to about Binghamton. There's a couple of flash flood warnings that are up around the Binghamton area. There was a report of a tornado in Buffalo today. I didn't get much detail about it, but I did see someone post that there was a tornado there, and we have some strong storms moving along the shores of the south shore of Lake Ontario and heading east toward looks like it just exited to the northeast of Rochester and then heading over towards Syracuse if it holds together. And we've got some downpours and a few thunderstorms up in central and northern New England, and on the Canada side too, up the St. Lawrence Valley and heading up into New Brunswick. And in the Midwest, we have some strong storms, a couple of tornado warnings there, southwest of Minneapolis, well southwest of Minneapolis in Minnesota, moving eastward, and some heavier downpours that extend into Wisconsin, and some patches of showers and some scattered thunder up and down the Rockies. So that's the action that's going on in the western part of the U.S. And the Storm Prediction Center. So here's your east-west area of risk that from Maine across New York and Pennsylvania, across the lower lakes, back into the upper Midwest. You can see the two severe thunderstorm watches in the east and the severe thunderstorm watch and the tornado in the watch in the upper Midwest. We also have a tornado watch for portions of southeast Georgia and into South Carolina. And convection has been a big deal here with this, so there's probably going to be more convective activity with the remnants with the tropical storm Debby. It's not a remnant low yet. Uh, Storm Prediction Center for tomorrow. Now, Joe, I suggested yesterday that they add a slight risk zone, and they did. Um, you know how they rely on us to guide them on occasion. But we've got a slight risk for north, central, and northeastern Ohio into western Pennsylvania. The marginal risk goes east to Connecticut and Long Island and goes west to Indiana. I think that, I tend to think that rain is going to be the bigger deal out of this, but they still might expand that slight risk area a bit tomorrow, uh, and just to maybe to include a little bit more geography.
This area that we're going to be watching tomorrow, this convective activity really does not have anything to do with the tropical system. This is a completely different system, sort of a weather front, if you will, that's going to slide on down and slowly move through, interact with all of the humid air that we've been dealt for the last several days, and will do its thing by creating areas of very heavy rainfall, which is why we tomorrow in the tri-state area are, according to WPC, under a slight risk of flash flooding. And the next day, we're under a marginal risk for flash flooding. So the word is wet over the next 24 to 48 hours. No question about that.
Mark G hitting super chat tonight. Thank you, Mark. Says next month, September, is the 25th anniversary of Floyd, when it interacted with a front to produce upwards to a foot of rain in western Connecticut and in the Hudson Valley.
Remember it well. I was on duty at News 12 Westchester and did an unbelievable amount of damage, flooding everywhere. Every single parkway in the lower Hudson Valley, the Springbrook Parkway, the Bronx River Parkway, you name it, it was flooded. And there was, you just had to sit and wait for it to gradually, slowly, painfully, uh, gradually dry out. Yeah, and that was the benchmark. I might add, that was the benchmark for most serious flooding situations up until we had Hurricane or Tropical Storm Irene in 2011. Then all of a sudden, Irene eclipsed Floyd in some cases with rainfall totals. If you notice, we've had these on average about once every 10 or 12 years. We really have not had that much or a tremendous amount of rainfall in about 10 or 12 years. So who's to say?
Yeah.
Maybe this upcoming event might be one to challenge for the record books, or maybe it'll be something else. So we'll see.
All right. Tomorrow, by the way, we also have a slight risk up in the the Dakotas northwestward up into Montana. Tomorrow's areas, by the way, a 2% tornado risk in northeast Ohio and western Pennsylvania, and also a 2% tornado risk along the South Carolina coast. And then for day three, a marginal risk along the South and North Carolina coast, marginal risk in the Western Plains. And you see they have the general thunderstorm line pushed up just north of New York City. This is for Wednesday into Thursday morning, so it just sort of this is the area here in the east, where you're going to have your tropical system um, in play. So you start to bring up the chances for thunderstorms coming in up from the south, general thunderstorms. But in terms of specifics, we're not really going to know yet. Uh, Now, let me just run through here. This is the satellite loop of Debbie, and still has a fairly impressive signature here with the center on land. But you can see the bands out in the ocean and the big thunderstorms, the lightning strikes that are going on offshore. So whenever you have a situation like this, the storms are slow to weaken because part of the circulation's over the open water. So they're getting almost like getting a lifeline of of moisture and energy from the from the ocean. But once the center emerges, Joe, I think this is going to be really important with regards to what we will may have to deal with later in the week. Uh, if it, in my opinion, if it winds up re-strengthening to a hurricane, which I think it's possible, before it makes a second landfall somewhere in South Carolina or near the South Carolina North Carolina state line, if there is a solid core that comes in and remains intact, that's going to play a role in how much rainfall occurs further up the coast. There'll be a fair amount of rain, even if there's not an organized a leftover organized remnant core. But if you've got the core in there, you might wind up with more rain than you've bargained for.
And that's going to be a very tricky forecast. A lot of that tropical moisture, again, coalescing with that weather front I just spoke about, and that could only cause again a major amount of rainfall later on in the week. Most notably, I think, Joe, the time frame I'm thinking of would be sometime later on Thursday night, and on into early Friday. I think that's going to be the time that whatever we see out of this, that's going to be the time frame when we're going to be getting the worst of it, the most of it here in the immediate tri-state area, and we'll just see how far nature can push this scenario in terms of rain later on in the week.
Yeah, timing on this is a little tricky. If you look at the Hurricane Center's forecast, they don't have the center. They have the center in southern Delaware Saturday afternoon, so they have a much slower track. I was thinking maybe along the lines of later Friday into early Saturday, and then weather conditions improving during the day on Saturday from southwest to northeast. A lot's going to really depend on what does it do when it gets off that coast of South Carolina. I tell you one thing, I've come to the conclusion after looking at models and the hurricane tracking models and all the rest of it. I think the GFS's idea of turning it almost 180 degrees and moving it westward back into southern Georgia and just basically getting it gets absorbed by the approaching cold front that's going to be coming down late in the week. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think the European, the Icon, the Canadian, and the hurricane tracking models all seem to have the same idea, and they were starting to come into uh, agreement yesterday, and I'm going along those lines. So a lot I think is going to depend on where's the low center going to go. Does it go up the inland of the coast and into eastern Pennsylvania or northwest New Jersey? In which case, you may wind up with heavier rains more to the north and west and less along the coast. Or are you going to ride something up more along the immediate coast, which brings rain and probably brings some wind into the equation? I don't think this is going to be like any kind of huge wind producer.
No, no, it does not. This looks like it's going to be the highlight of this is going to be mostly rain, I think. And the question is just how much are we going to get? How much are we going to see? The hand drawn frogs have the storm system just off the South Carolina coast Thursday morning, Joe. Thursday morning. It really is moving very, very, very slowly. And then by Friday morning, inland, barely inland, up near the North Carolina, South Carolina border. Saturday, what is left of the storm center may make it, as you just pointed out, up near Delaware. And then the question will be with high pressure, and it's a nice dome of dry, cool air, but it's centered way back over the Dakotas and Minnesota, whether or not enough of that dry air can push far enough to the east to push the storm or the remnants of Debbie out away from our coastlines Saturday into early Sunday. And so we would be able to avoid any kind of major problem in terms of very, very heavy rain. But I think again, the main concern for a lot of us here in the tri-state area is not going to be so much from Debbie, but again, this weather front, this front that is going to be in our general vicinity for the next couple of days, and likely will tap into Atlantic moisture, maybe tap into a little bit of moisture streaming northward out of Debbie, and set the stage for a really noteworthy period of hefty rain here for the middle and latter part of this week.
Well, let's see if the new advisory is in. Yep, it's 30.7, 82.4. It was 30 miles south of Valdosta, so I'm guessing now it's maybe 30 miles southeast of Valdosta. We'll give it credit for moving 18 miles. Maximum winds still 45 miles an hour, moving northeast at 6. And you can see the hurricane center turns it to the east and then turns it north later Wednesday and Wednesday night. Offshore South Carolina brings it ashore. They have it on the forecast as a tropical storm, but when you read the discussion, they allow for the possibility that it could strengthen. So we've got tropical storm warnings up through the central middle South Carolina coast, and then we go to a tropical storm watch into portions of North Carolina, not quite to Wilmington, but to Cape Fear, I believe. And you can see their track as it turns and goes northward and then northeastward. And if we look at the tracking models of the model track guidance of where the low center is going to go, uh, anywhere from northwest New Jersey to off the New Jersey coast, somewhere in that alleyway. So again, if that's where the low goes, that's probably close to where the heavy rain is or is going to be. Although there's usually a tendency for the heavier rains to be north and northwest of the low track, so we're going to have to work that out. And after that, it goes by, goes on its merry way through uh, central interior New England, central and southern New England on the most northern tracks, and right over southeastern New England on the southernmost tracks. And most of the intensity models have Debbie staying at tropical storm strength right through the next 7 days. Some of them weaken it down, but let's say half of them weaken it to below tropical storm strength after 96 hours. So those are probably the models that take it well inland, while the ones that keep it closer to the coast or have various other tracks are the ones that keep it a tropical storm right through the 7 day period. And again, I'm buying I'm the Europeans' idea, the icons idea to me makes the most again it's the one that seems to be the most sensible uh given climatology, and it's actually quite close to what the Hurricane Center is doing. You can see the low goes out east offshore. This is Wednesday afternoon. Of course, in the meantime, you got all this rain going on in southeast Georgia, in South Carolina, in North Carolina, and the pressure drops back down to about a 980-ish low. So it could very well become a hurricane before going inland. Now, this is Thursday afternoon. By the time we get to Friday afternoon, it's on the Pennsylvania, on the Virginia, North Carolina state border, about halfway across, and you can see all the rain. And of course, yeah, Joe is correct in pointing out the front from Tuesday for tomorrow produces an east-west band of downpours and thunderstorms, and there'll probably be some severe storms in the mix and some heavy rain in the mix, and it just kind of lays there. You've got a weak high that goes to the north and just sort of presses in, and here comes what at this point what's left of Debbie. It's a nice little non-tropical low or post-tropical low, I should say. I don't know when they'll make it post-tropical, but I'm sure they'll be in a rush to do it. And then it goes northeast by 1 a.m. It's in Chesapeake Bay. By 7 a.m. it's Saturday, and it's in Delaware Bay, and then they have it in northwest New Jersey, right on the border of PA, on the European by seven by I'm sorry by 8 a.m. Saturday, and then it goes on to the northeast from there. The gradient is, the gradient actually gets tightish for the Jersey coast if this is the correct track. So it might get a little gusty. You might have some gales along the coast with this. And the other thing is, once it goes out, I think we're going to get into a pretty nice dry air mass for a couple of days on the backside. Because most times when we get these tropical systems, after they go, they do a little bit of house cleaning for the atmosphere and they bring in some nice dry air. And I think we're going to see that from that maybe not so much on Saturday because it might take a while to clean to get it out of here, but certainly I think for Sunday and Monday of next week.
Yeah, that's going to be the thing that we've been waiting for is a nice swath of much lower dew points and humidity that will be enveloping our area on the tail end or on the backside of this departing tropical system. That'll literally, the tropical system will be pulling all of that nice, dry, fresh air from Canada into our area on northwesterly winds for the end of the week and into the upcoming weekend. Sunday and Monday, if everything works out, could be quite glorious with blue sky, bright sun, low humidity, and pleasantly warm temperatures. But the price we have to pay for that will be for several days of possible misery here with potential for flooding concerns tomorrow and again probably on Thursday into Friday. So we'll just see how this all pans out. Again, the initial shot of abnormal precipitation, heavy precipitation, is going to come not from Debbie, but from this weather front that's going to
Right.
be
This thing.
down from our north. And then later in the week, we'll see the corpse of Debbie or whatever is left of Debbie moving into our general vicinity and perhaps bringing its own share of hefty rainfall here for again later on in the week.
Yeah, this is what the GFS does. It barely brings it offshore and then takes it straight west back into western Georgia, southwestern Georgia. Um, and that low just dies out, but all the tropical moisture gets pulled up the East Coast, which you got this front that's approaching. So you do wind up with the rain. I just don't think that's correct. I think you're going to see the low, an intact, tropical storm or hurricane going into South Carolina or even into North Carolina, making us a landfall, and then the post-tropical low will wind up coming up and enhancing the rainfall for the Mid-Atlantic and for the Northeast. Brandon Doherty, thank you for hitting Super Chat. Also, Izzy D, thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight. And Birder Lady, thank you, all three of you, for hitting the Chat tip jar. And also, thank you, those of you who hit the like button, 64 likes. We love it when we get to 100 likes. So if you like the show, by all means, hit the like button. And by the way, just to show you with this dew point, I love the dew point maps when you get into August. But you can see the dry air gets all the way down into the south. To me, dew points in the low 50s. There's an upper 40s dew point, Joe, a print in southwestern North Carolina. That's close enough for me to say that that's me. Come Sunday morning. In fact, during the day, it looks like, yeah, 49 and then 42 during the day, or 44. I can't see it. It's kind of over the state border. Oh, 48, 48. So in these tropical systems, sometimes when they hook up with these weather fronts that come down from Canada, the upside is that uh, you get a nice dry dome of air to come down, and it looks like those 50 dew points hold on even into next Tuesday before you start to go back to the dew points in the upper 60s and low 70s.
And I'm looking also, just as a matter of reference, looking at Le Plumes. Just wanted to see what they were saying. And in Poughkeepsie, by late Thursday night, early Friday morning, they drop in Poughkeepsie 2.16 inches. And if you
Right.
go further south to White Plains, they drop 2.65 inches. So, I mean,
Yeah, but
uh,
that's Debbie-less. That's without the Debbie moisture because
right,
that hasn't come up yet.
right, exactly. And but that's a pretty good, that's a pretty damn good total, just from a weather front, cold front, slow moving front, and then we'll see what we can add on to that later in the week and into the start of the weekend with the remnants of Debbie passing on by.
All right. So we're going to wrap it up tonight so that we can. I did not sleep well last night. I've been up since 3 a.m. It was one of those nights where I was exhausted last night. I went to bed about 9:15. Fell asleep right away, and the next thing I know, I'm wide awake at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm sorry, 3 o'clock in the morning. Could
Wow.
not go back to sleep. So I couldn't even, I tried to take a nap, couldn't even do that. So I feel as if my body is going to be crashing very soon. David, I'm 100 miles north of Atlanta. I rarely get to Atlanta. I've only been there a couple of times in the three and a half, almost 4 years that I've been here.
It's kind of
It's
like
a
the equivalent of somebody. It's like kind of like a person who lives in Kingston, New York. And how often do you get into New York City? I mean, that's as you just said, Joe, about 100 miles. Not
Yeah.
too many. So
So it's very rare that I get down into there. I do go down to the Marietta, Georgia, which is on the northern part of north side of Atlanta, um, a suburb of Atlanta. But I rarely get into Atlanta. But from what I've seen of it, I mean, it certainly has its you know good points and its bad points, like any urban area does. It's a nice looking city. It's been, built up quite a bit in the last 20 or 30 years. I like it when I've been there. Been to a few, the aquarium and, there's where they play where the Braves play. But I forgot, I don't even know what the name of the stadium is.
they've gone through several stadiums over the last 30 or 40 years. So,
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Well, it's all about the Georgia Bulldogs down here with regards to college football. So that's the big deal here in Georgia. So
Brandon Doherty wants you to say La Plumes.
Les Plumes de la Brioski.
All right.
All right. The Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, as it is every night, brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the descriptor to this podcast. Use that coupon code Joe Rayo.
Summer 2024,
If
Joe.
if you do, you will get.
10% off.
All right, folks. Thanks for the 88 likes, and we'll see everybody tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Night night.
Nighty night, folks.